Hi, my name is Dave Phillips and I represent DP Examiner LLC. And this presentation is going to regard the limited liability company. In other words, it's just some simple examining process that I'd like to share with the audience. Now, first of all, what is the structure of an LLC? Well, an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company, is owned by members, and this can be one or more owners. Very common to see one or two or even three owners of an LLC. Limited liability is created by the Articles of Organization, and it's directed by the operating agreement of such company. And it's typically managed by a managing member. This is the person that's appointed to run the day-to-day operations. And I'll talk about each of these in turn. Now, first of all, when you see that you have an LLC involved, particularly as your seller on the property, there are a number of things that you can take advantage of thanks to modern technology and the internet that you can get to, helping you to simplify the exam process. So first of all, you identify your seller. Now, this is going to obviously come from your, hopefully your last deed in the chain of title, and it should coincide with the seller on the purchase agreement. Now, what I do is I start the search by going into the Michigan corporate site, often referred to as the LARA site. And here's a copy of the address. You can simply enter that in your browser, hit enter, and it'll pop up to the Michigan corporate site. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the things that I deal with or pay attention to within this site. Okay, I'm going to pull up my laser pointer here. I always have fun with these things, trying to figure out how exactly they work. Okay, so this is what I would call drilling down into the corporate site. I'm using my company as an example here. This is of public record, so you can go in and enter literally thousands of companies and pull up information on them. My company is DP Examiner LLC, and I wanted to use mine because it does offer some unique insights into the use of this LARA site and how you track a corporation from its birth right through sometimes to its termination or dissolution. So here, this is the front page. When I search DP Examiner LLC, this is what comes up. I just took a snippet of the relevant sections. So the name of the company is DP Examiner LLC. It's a domestic limited liability company, which means it's a Michigan limited liability company. If it were foreign, you'd have to try to determine what state it was incorporated in. Now, I originally formed this company in April of 2012, and at that time it was Dave Phillips Productions LLC. I didn't quite know what the Productions was going to mean, but I think I had delusions of grandeur at the time, so I decided to rename it something a little more apropos to what I do. So again, it's a domestic limited liability company formed in April of 2012. Now, I had to change the name from Dave Phillips Productions to DP Examiner, and that's what I want to show you here in some of these drill down sections. And these are all available as a drop down on the LARA site. So here, when you enter view all filings, you can click on Articles of Organization, and for any company listed in there, it's going to show the original filing of the articles. And again, I'm showing the relevant section here. This isn't anything too crazy. I'm just trying to show you how the papers that are filed and how the legal name is created and how the corporation is in fact created. So this is received in April of 2012, and it was endorsed. It just means you've paid your filing fees. The name is available and you are welcome to it, and that's what the Articles of Organization are. It's a birth certificate. It's an AKA, it'd be like a birth certificate of a person. So when I went from Dave Phillips Productions LLC and convert it over to DP Examiner, you file this simple certificate of amendment of articles of organization. I did this in April of 2017, changing the name from Dave Phillips Productions to DP Examiner LLC. Again, the only real loophole here or condition is they want to make sure that this name is available, and if so, you can change the name of your business. Very, very simple process. It takes a matter of, in fact, seconds to do. But this is what's filed with the state. Now Dave Phillips Productions becomes DP Examiner LLC. And finally is the annual statement. I use this frequently when I'm looking at LLCs online pertaining to the seller. Because sometimes if a corporation is active but not in good standing, typically the reason is that they haven't yet filed their annual statement, or they haven't for a number of years. I don't want to get into that on this slide, but you would simply file a certificate of restoration, pay your late fees, and your company would be returned to a good standing with the state of Michigan. But this is the annual statement, and you'll see these usually from the year it's formed, the articles of organization forward. You'll see this once a year, and that's what a healthy company is going to be doing, or at least that's paying attention to their accounting end. They're going to be filing these about the same time every year, and it extends out for 1 year. You file these each year, and your company stays in good standing. So that's a look at the drill down, I would call it, of the Michigan corporate site. It's very useful. It's very user friendly, and it's something that all examiners should really pay attention to. And in particular, to find out that it's a healthy company, and to get the legal name of the entity when it was formed. And I'll talk more about that in a minute here. So regarding examination procedures, once you've matched everything up, the PA, the deed, the seller on the purchase agreement, then you need to go into your Schedule B1 and draft your requirements on what you're going to need from this entity. Now, what I did here is I kind of split. I'll show you this and then the next page. These are requirements you'd use when no information is available. Sometimes it can be a brand new company. Nothing yet's online. You don't have anything in the file. They haven't forwarded anything to your agency at this time. So then you'd use this requirement up front here. Submit to the company copies of articles of organization of DP Examiner LLC as filed with the state of Michigan. Submit satisfactory evidence that the LLC is in good standing, and you would want a copy of the operating agreement directing the proper managers and members to execute the transaction. Now these are what we just took a look online on the LARA site. We were able to view the articles of organization and the fact that DP Examiner LLC is in good standing. Again, though, this is an example of when you have no information. So you would ask for these 3 requirements to be fulfilled. Then you would ask for the warranty deed from DP Examiner LLC, a Michigan limited liability company. Now, to me, I always pay particular attention to the name of the entity, what state it's formed in. If you really want to be a professional with these requirements, you'll get this stuff right. As many examiners know, you'll get a purchase agreement that is abbreviated, signed by an unidentifiable person or entity to be formed, something of that nature. But when you start gathering your information and then you enter the Michigan site, if there's nothing there, when you're supplied the articles of organization, it's going to indicate, of course, at that time, what the name of the entity is, where it's formed. And then you can draft your warranty deed properly. And this is particularly important if you're dealing with commercial transactions where you're going to have attorneys, presumably on both sides, lenders, underwriters. So the chance for you to get this right and look sharp is pretty important at this stage. And as you might have guessed, there is the converse of the previous page. This regards requirements when information is obtained. So your purchase agreement indicates DP Examiner LLC is the seller. I've signed it. You go on the Michigan site, you pull up all your relevant information. Now all you're going to need at this point in your requirements section is going to be a copy of the operating agreement, because that is not online, of DP Examiner, and this is going to indicate who runs this entity and who's authorized to sign the deed and convey the property. And again, once we have this information, we ask for a warranty deed from DP Examiner LLC, a Michigan limited liability company, to the purchaser. And this note on sole member LLC, this comes up very, very frequently, because it's been my experience that I would bet over 50% of LLCs that you'll deal with are sole member LLCs. In Michigan, a sole member LLC is recognized. I don't know if it's recognized in every state, but that need not concern us, because we are concerned about property within the great confines of the mitten. So the sole member LLC, what's really important here is that there's not a requirement for an operating agreement. So what you'll get usually in return is your processing department or whoever is handling the next stage of the commitment will get an email or some communication from the owner that is a sole member LLC. And just because it's a sole member does not mean that they don't have an operating agreement. It's very prudent to have one. I'm a sole member LLC, and I certainly have one, because it comes in handy, and sometimes people will not be particularly comfortable if there's not an operating agreement in place, but it is not necessary for a sole member. Now, before I conclude this brief presentation, I wanted to make a note regarding the buyer of the property. Many times you'll have an LLC that comes in as the buyer of the property, and you'll hear the argument of people will say, well, it's a cash deal. You don't need to see a copy of the operating agreement, etc. And I think a lot of people read that into just saying, okay, we don't need anything from the buyer in this situation. But I want to point out a couple of reasons why you still want to go down the road of checking the website for this information on a buyer. And the biggest reason is it establishes the proper legal name of the entity taking title. You're going to be insuring an LLC as an owner. You want to make sure that name is correct and that you have the reflection of the proper state that they were incorporated in. And it establishes good standing. It's going to show you if there's any issues with the company, if they're not in good standing. If so, you'd want to obtain a certificate of restoration prior to closing, reestablishing that entity. Okay, so that concludes my brief presentation on the limited liability company. For a title examiner, everything comes down to your Schedule A and your Schedule B1. Those are the prominent sections when you're dealing with a worksheet and how to work up the information that you're looking for from a client. Now, the good thing about being a title examiner is you don't need to worry about the history of limited liability companies or an in-depth study. What you need to know is what you need to get from the entity in order to pass good title. Of course, following your underwriter guidelines and your agency procedures along the way. But I just tried to simplify here the heart and soul of how you should go about it. So thanks for listening, and I'll be posting again soon.